She said they were moving in to take care of me. She used the word practical. She cut her French toast into neat little squares while she said it, and her husband nodded along beside her like the whole thing had been settled weeks ago, which, as it turned out, it had. I picked up my coffee mug, took one slow sip, and set it back on the saucer. That's going to be a problem, I said. I sold the house 2 weeks ago. The fork stopped halfway to her mouth. You what? Sold it. I reached for the sugar. The buyers moved in last Saturday. Lovely couple. They're from Cincinnati. My son-in-law looked at my daughter. My daughter looked at me. The restaurant was warm around us, the kind of place with exposed brick and weekend specials chalked on a board, chosen by her because it was close to the house she'd already decided was hers. You can't be serious, she said. I signed the papers at the title company on the 14th. I stirred my coffee. I have a copy if you'd like to see it. She put the fork down. Her husband uncrossed his arms and then recrossed them the other direction. I watched the calculation move across both their faces. Not grief, not hurt, just the sudden arithmetic of a plan falling apart. I had known by then for quite some time. The knowing had come in pieces the way most things do. It started in March, 4 months before that brunch. My daughter had always called on Sundays, when she started showing up instead. Both of them together, sometimes without calling at all. I told myself it was a good thing. Parents worry when their children stay away. I'd spent 2 years after Hugh died quietly hoping someone would stop by. But there's a difference between visiting and measuring, and I didn't understand that at first. My son-in-law is a tall man who fills doorways. He'd stand at the entrance to a room for just a beat too long, his eyes moving across the ceiling, the corners, the baseboards. He'd say something like, "This is a good-sized room," the way you'd say it about a rental unit, not a space you were standing in out of courtesy. I told myself I was reading too much into it. Hugh used to say I had a gift for pessimism dressed up as intuition. He said it kindly. He was usually wrong. In April, my daughter suggested I donate my garden tools. You're not really using the back half of the yard anymore, she said, which was true, but it was mine to leave unused. She offered to take them to Goodwill, save me the trouble. I said I'd think about it. The tools stayed in the shed. In May, I found the printout on the kitchen counter. I'd come downstairs early that Saturday. They'd stayed over, something about traffic, and there it was beside the coffee maker. A page from the Airbnb host resource center. My address was written at the top in her handwriting, the good blue pen she borrows from my junk drawer without asking. Below it, a table of projected monthly earnings for a property, my square footage, in my zip code, circled in red, $3,240, $800 depending on season and availability. I folded the paper twice and put it in the pocket of my robe. I didn't say anything. I made coffee. I said good morning when they came downstairs. My daughter talked about a show she was watching. My son-in-law ate 3 pieces of toast. A week later, I found the rest of it. Her phone was face up on the dining room table, screen lit from a notification. I wasn't looking for anything. I was setting out placemats. But the screen was right there, and the group chat preview was right there, before I'd made any decision about whether to look. Once we figure out Mom's situation, the timeline opens up, it said. The name above the message was a friend of my daughter's, someone I'd met twice at a birthday party. My daughter's reply sat just below. Working on it, she's easier to manage than she thinks she is. I set the last placemat down. I went to the kitchen and ran the water cold and held my wrists under it for a moment, the way you do when your face feels too hot. Easier to manage. I was 63 years old. I had taught high school English for 28 years. I had raised her alone for 4 of those years when Hugh's job moved him to a regional office 3 states away, and we made it work with long-distance calls and monthly drives. I had kept the furnace running and the property taxes paid and the gutters clear every November since 1999. I had never once in my life needed to be managed. I didn't confront her that evening. I needed to think first, and I think best alone. The floor plan turned up 2 weeks later. I found it in the guest room, tucked between the mattress and the box spring, which is a strange place for anything unless you're afraid of it being seen. It was hand-drawn on graph paper, careful and labeled, the kind of thing you make when you've been planning long enough to need to see the shape of it. Each room had been renamed. The living room, common area check-in station. The guest room, her office. My room, the room I had slept in for 26 years, where Hugh died in the bed we'd bought together in 1994, where I still kept his reading glasses on the nightstand because I hadn't been ready to move them, was labeled primary suite, guest revenue. Not my room, not even master bedroom, just a revenue stream with a door. I sat on the edge of the guest bed for a long time. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the woodpecker who'd been working on the oak tree since spring. I'd been meaning to call someone about that woodpecker. Hugh would have Googled whether it was legal to relocate one. I thought about what it means to be erased from a place you built. Not pushed out dramatically. No one had raised a voice, no one had handed me papers. Just slowly redrawn, room by room, until I was a line item. A temporary obstacle between them and a floor plan they'd already named. That was the evening I called Ingrid. Ingrid ran a small practice 2 towns over, estate and property law, and she'd handled the paperwork when Hugh died. She was precise and unhurried, the kind of attorney who answers her own phone and remembers your husband's name 3 years later. I told her what I'd found. She asked a few questions. Then she went quiet in the way that means she is thinking rather than stalling. "You own the property outright," she said. "Clear title, no liens, no joint tenancy. Your daughter has no legal interest, no claim, no standing. Not unless you've made written promises, which I'm guessing you haven't." What about verbal? Verbal agreements about property transfer are nearly impossible to enforce without corroboration, and even then, they'd need to demonstrate you made a clear, specific commitment. She paused. "Is there any document anywhere indicating you intended to leave her the house?" I thought of Hugh's will. He had left everything to me. I had never written my own, something I'd been meaning to address for 2 years. "Nothing in writing," I said. "Then this is straightforward. It's yours to do with as you choose. Sell it, keep it, gift it. They have no say." I told her I wanted to sell it. I asked her to recommend someone discreet. She didn't ask me to explain myself. That meant more than I expected. The realtor was a quiet woman who specialized in quick transactions. She showed the house to 7 buyers over 3 weeks. The 5th were the ones, Audra and James, early 30s, relocating for James's job at the hospital. Cash offer, no contingencies, closing in 30 days. I asked the realtor if they seemed like people who would stay. She said they'd asked about the school district, even though they didn't have children yet. She said James's had walked slowly through the backyard and stopped at Hugh's raised vegetable beds and asked whether he could keep them. I said yes, I signed the papers. The closing was a Tuesday morning in a beige office suite at the title company on 5th Street. Ingrid sat beside me. I read everything before I signed anything. I always have. When it was done, the agent shook my hand and said congratulations, which struck me as an odd thing to say and also the correct one. I drove home and made tea and sat in Hugh's armchair and looked at the living room for a while. Then I started taking down the photographs, slowly, wrapping each frame in dish towels. I had already put a deposit on a condo 2 towns over. 2nd floor, corner unit, a balcony that caught afternoon light. I'd visited it twice before making the offer, both times on a Wednesday when my daughter thought I was at book club. The movers came on a Thursday. By Friday, the house was empty. Audra and James had their keys. The brunch was my daughter's idea. She'd texted to ask if I wanted to catch up somewhere nice, which in our language means she had an agenda she didn't want to address over the phone. I said yes. I knew what was coming, or thought I did. She chose the cafe with the exposed brick. She ordered something with avocado. Her husband got eggs. I got coffee and a blueberry muffin and tried to remember the last time we'd sat together without a purpose underneath it. "We wanted to talk to you about the house," she started. "All right," I said. She laid it out the way you lay out a business proposal, thoughtfully, warmly, with reasons arranged in order of appeal. They'd been struggling with debt. She said this carefully, watching my face. The credit cards from the wedding, the car note, the rent going up again in January. Moving in was, she said, the responsible choice, the family-oriented choice. I'd have company. They'd have breathing room. You've been lonely since Dad died, she said. You've said so yourself. I said I missed your father, I told her. That's a different thing. Mom, she put her hand on mine. We just want to help. I looked at her hand on mine. She has Hugh's hands. Same square knuckles, same way of pressing her thumb down when she wants you to pay attention. You didn't ask me, I said. Not once in 4 months of planning. Did either of you ask if this was something I wanted? Her husband shifted in his seat. We assumed. I know, I said. That was the problem. My daughter pulled her hand back. We were going to sit down and talk everything through. That's what this is. The Airbnb projections were part of this conversation. Silence, her jaw tightened just slightly. The floor plan with my bedroom labeled guest revenue. Was that part of it too? Her husband set down his fork. He glanced at her. Those were just ideas, she said. Early brainstorming. In my guest room, on graph paper with room labels. Mom. I'm not angry, I said. And I meant it, which surprised me a little. I wasn't angry. I was clear. There's a difference, and it had taken me most of the summer to find it. I'm telling you what I found, and I'm telling you why the house isn't available. She waited. I sold it 2 weeks ago, I said. The buyers are already settled in. The restaurant kept going around us. Someone at the next table laughed at something. A server refilled a water glass. My daughter sat very still. You sold, she stopped. You sold the house. My house, I said, yes. Her husband found his voice first. You didn't tell us. You didn't give us any chance to. You didn't ask, I said. You made a plan. I made a plan. Mine involved the deed. My daughter's eyes were bright in a way that wasn't quite tears. We were trying to build something. For us. For you. You were trying to build something at my expense, I said, and call it a gift. I left money on the table for the coffee and the muffin. I picked up my purse. I said I hoped they found a solution to the debt that didn't require someone else's home. I said it without malice, which took some effort. Then I walked out into the September air and sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. Just breathing. The sky was that particular blue that only happens in early fall, the kind that looks almost too deliberate to be natural. Hugh loved that sky. I started the car and drove to my new condo. My daughter called that evening, then again an hour later. The third time, my son-in-law's name came up on the screen instead, which told me things had shifted into a different register. I answered. He said I had sabotaged their future. He said Hugh would have wanted the house to stay in the family. He said what I'd done was deceptive, that I had acted in bad faith, that it was cruel to do this to a pregnant. And here he paused for just half a second, long enough for me to understand this was new information released now as leverage. Woman. I let him finish. Hugh left the house to me, I said, because he trusted me to decide what to do with it. This is what I decided. You didn't even tell her. She didn't tell me she was projecting rental income off my address, I said. We both made choices. Mine was legal. He said something I'll leave out. I said goodnight and meant it as both a genuine wish and a conclusion, and then I ended the call. I made chamomile tea. I stood at the window and looked at the parking lot below, which was not beautiful, but was also not a battlefield. My shoulders, I noticed, were at their natural height for the first time in months. The news about a grandchild sat at the back of my mind. I let it sit. There would be time for that, for what it meant, for what I wanted it to mean. Later, not tonight. Tonight I was just a woman in a corner unit with tea and silence, and that was exactly enough. The envelope arrived at their apartment 10 days later. I'd mailed it the morning after the phone call, before I had a chance to second-guess myself. Inside a photograph and a note. The photograph was from the summer she turned 9. We were in the backyard, and she was standing in Hugh's vegetable garden, both hands full of tomatoes, grinning so wide her eyes had nearly disappeared. She'd worn her favorite red sneakers into the dirt, despite being told not to, and there was a smear of soil across her chin, and she looked like someone who had never once in her life been anything but entirely herself. The note had one sentence: "This garden is yours forever, But the house was always just the ground it grew in. I didn't know if she would understand it. I hoped she might, eventually. I didn't need her to agree with me. I just needed her to know I hadn't done it from bitterness, and that the version of her in that photograph was one I still carried carefully, the way you carry something you're not ready to put down. Audra sent a card about 2 weeks after they moved in, handwritten on plain white stationery. We found the garden journal in the shed. Your notes on the tomatoes go back to 2009. We're going to keep the raised beds going. James has been watching YouTube tutorials every evening. Also, your woodpecker is still here. We named him Winston. I sat with that card for a long time. There is something particular about being known through the things you've tended. The garden journal was spiral-bound and falling apart at the cover, and I had never once imagined anyone would read it. But she had, and she'd written to tell me, and that small act of attention was worth more than every expression of concern my daughter had offered about my loneliness. I put the card on the refrigerator. I bought a new fern for the balcony. I called my friend from book club and said yes to the Tuesday lunches I'd been declining for 2 years because I'd been too tired, or too sad, or too busy holding together a house that slowly started to feel like a trap I'd walked into of my own making. The condo is small. 1 bedroom, a den I've turned into a reading room, a kitchen where I can stand in the center and touch both counters without stretching. There's a community room downstairs with a jigsaw puzzle, perpetually in progress. Someone has been working on the same European city skyline since July and is roughly 40% done. I have contributed 17 pieces. I know because I counted. My balcony faces west. In the evenings, when the light goes gold across the rooftops, I bring out my coffee and whatever I'm reading that week, and I stay until it gets too cold to stay. I still haven't written my will. That's next on the list. Ingrid already sent me the intake form. My daughter and I have not spoken since the phone call. I expect we will, eventually. I'm not in a hurry, and I don't think she is either. Some distances need their full amount of time before they can close, honestly. I know this from teaching. You cannot rush the moment when someone finally understands something. You can only make sure the door is still there when they're ready. Hugh used to say a home isn't something you own, it's something you become. I spent 26 years becoming that house on Meridian Street. Its drafty winters, its stubborn back gate, its October garden. The way the kitchen light fell at 4 in the afternoon, like it had somewhere better to be, and couldn't quite leave. Now I'm becoming something new, smaller, quieter, mine in a way the other place stopped being the moment someone else started drawing floor plans inside it. I poured the last of the coffee this morning and stood at the balcony railing and watched a pair of sparrows argue over the feeder I'd hung from the bracket by the door. The sky was that early October blue, the good kind, the kind that doesn't apologize for being beautiful. I thought about my daughter in her red sneakers. I thought about Hugh reading in his chair. I thought about Audra and James and a woodpecker named Winston doing whatever woodpeckers do in the fall. I thought I am not disappearing. I am not in decline. I am not a room to be repurposed or a schedule to be quietly managed. I am a woman who still keeps notes on her tomatoes, who tips movers well, who reads handwritten cards with the same care she once gave to essays turned in by 16-year-olds who were trying their best. I am still trying my best. The sparrows settled. I finished my coffee. It was enough.